Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. It's your host, Mikel Dia, and I am very excited for today's episode because we are going to dive into everything related to agency operations. If you're feeling like, you can't get a handle on your operations, you're always stuck in your business and you're always trying to figure out, how do I get out of it? Well, today's guest is an expert at helping agencies get out of that operation and really systemize the operations of their agencies. My guest is Melanie Chandruang. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited.
Me too. Me too. As always, what I like to do with every single episode is let our guests introduce themselves. So tell me your humble or not so humble bragging rights. What have you been able to do for clients? What have you done for your own business? In other words, why should people really listen?
Yeah. Well, I'm the founder of WeConsult, and I've been doing that for about 6 years now, where I offer fractional operations and operations consulting for agencies specifically. But outside of that, I've been in the space of operations and agencies for the past 13 years. And during that time, I've helped agencies scale to acquisition, which has been really exciting to see them get to that point. And aside from that, I help agencies scale their operations to meet their financial goals, to get out of the weeds as an owner. It's whatever the goal is of the agency. I help them reach those goals through efficiencies in their operations.
What are you seeing is the biggest goal that people come to you with? Like, is it to get out of the weeds? Is it to sell? Is it that they're tired and they've been at it for so long and they're like, I don't really like services and I want to, what exactly do you kind of notice?
Yeah, well, it's all of the above. I feel like when people initially come to me, they come with a very specific problem. Like, my team is not equipped to deliver whatever it is to clients in the way that we need to. And usually that's a symptom of something else. And so I will help to dissect what is that actual root cause of the issues. And oftentimes it is things like they don't have their eyes on the financials and metrics in order to make business decisions, or maybe it is an owner that's really in the weeds with their team. They're getting, sucked into a lot of the day to day, and they are ending up being the bottleneck. And so it really depends on the agency, but that is an often or a common theme that I do see amongst agencies across the board.
So walk me through that process of diagnosing that symptom, right? Like, because if it is an underlying cause, what are you looking for, and what should agencies be looking for in order to understand what is that problem?
Right. I always start with the financials. What are the financials telling me about the business? I relate it to going to the doctor and getting your blood work taken. You want to understand where your baselines are and where you measure on those baselines. And so for me, that is financials and a lot of the performance metrics. So obviously I start with, what are the overall like net profit of the agency as a whole? What's the revenue capacity that this agency actually has, and where are they leaving money on the table? And then going into performance metrics, it's going to be things like utilization of the team. How many hours, billable hours, are the team actually billing compared to what their capacity is? And so, that's just a sampling of some of the metrics that I look at, but I always start there because once I understand whether a number is healthy or not, that's where I can dig deeper to figure out, okay, what's actually going on with this. Maybe it's low utilization, and maybe it's that they're not even tracking, hours across the board. And so it's going to be, I start with the numbers and then I dig deeper.
Okay, so you dive kind of into the financials and some of the KPIs and basically the results. And that kind of gives you an indication of whether or not, there's a problem here or there's not a problem here. And what are you looking for? Like, so I come to you as an agency owner. I'm stressed. I'm tired. I'm overworking, my profits are very low. Let's say I'm making $80,000 a month. My profits are, I don't know, let's call it $8,000 a month. So I got about 10% margins. I've got a pretty heavy team. Like, so you're kind of going through this process of diving into the numbers, but what are you looking for exactly?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking for where we can improve the operations in order to move the needle on those numbers. So one of the metrics that I track, for example, is revenue to salaries, like that ratio. And so say, for example, you're like, our team, we're bringing projects in, we're delivering on the work. We just cannot increase our profit margins overall as an agency. I'm going to look at your overall revenue capacity, first of all, like how much as a team should you be able to make? And then from there, looking at things like revenue to salaries. Is the ratio within the realm of healthy? And if not, maybe you're at like 70% salary to revenue. That's extremely high. And so I could suggest, while your team is being paid very well, which is amazing for them, is there something that maybe your team isn't being fully utilized? And so maybe you need to think about, making some restructuring on your team in order to get that number to a more healthy number in order to get more profit. And so I'm going to suggest things like that. And it's obviously going to depend on which area of the business I'm looking at. So it is always different, but the numbers always lead me to the correct place to kind of take a peek.
Yeah, I mean, everything is about data and everything is about making data-driven decisions. Let's take a step back. How did you kind of get here? What was your agency journey like? How did you all of a sudden decide, you know what, I'm really good at this agency operations stuff? Walk me through that journey.
Yeah. Well, I started at a custom dev shop, and I started in operations, very low level operations. I was like, just throw anything at me. And I fell in love with all things back of the house operations. So for me, that's all the financials, managing of people, managing of the actual business. What does it take to run the actual company behind the scenes and behind even the client delivery aspect of the business? So I started there, and like I said, I fell in love with it, and I really enjoyed making the business kind of a well-oiled machine, and also fell in love with processes at one of my first jobs there. So from there, I went into more of the creative agency space. So they were doing mainly design, front end design, just the UX UI design, and then also front end development. And so this was a different experience for me, but that's kind of where I fell in love with just creative agencies and agencies in general. It was a larger workplace. It was at the time 40 people, so still a small agency, but I really loved being a part of an agency where people are doing amazing things around me. It was really exciting. I'm not doing anything creative. I'm working in spreadsheets. It's kind of boring, but I was able to support that type of business. And then from there, once I started working my way up in the operations chain, I was able to work alongside the CEOs and COOs. And I really felt like I had the skills to support them best. And, for those of you who have read Traction by Gino Wickman, that's a really popular book on the EOS, you know, system. And that's essentially what I am. I'm that type of integrator for businesses. And for me, it's specifically agencies that I've just fallen in love with.
Interesting. And at what stage, like where was the tipping point for you where you kind of started to realize, oh, okay, like was it a specific event that happened to you? Was it kind of a series of coincidences and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is the path I should be on? What did that look like?
Mm, yeah. So it actually was much later in my career that I really understood the value of what I can bring to the table. And I think it was a couple years into consulting on my own because I had been in-house up until 2018. And then in 2018, at the beginning of it, is when I started my own business. And it was a couple years into that I shifted my focus from being an advocate for the teams and the people and growth. And, to be frank, I had a lot of really bad managers in my career. And so I was always an advocate for the teams and people and how can they do their best work? How can they be most fulfilled? I'm still absolutely an advocate for that. But I think the needle has moved a little bit further to the direction of the owners are really struggling. I've worked alongside owners now for past 6 or 7 years. And that is where, they are the ones that own the business. They're the ones taking the risk, but they're also the ones that are most stressed. And so over time, I was finding, oh my gosh, I have the skills to relieve the stress from them. And so I think it was at that point that I realized, okay, I can really have a bigger impact because I can look after the teams, but I can also relieve the owners of this stress and kind of the hamster wheel that they kind of find themselves on over, the course of their time running an agency.
Yeah, it can be extremely stressful for sure. Entrepreneurs and founders are trying to do a lot of things all at the same time, and the last thing we are, most of us, is integrators and operations. We have big visions, like, yeah, let's hustle our way to whatever. And it's like, and also let's set up these unrealistic goals, but we know we can do them in our minds. So it's always good to have that person who's like, okay, how are we actually going to get to these goals, right? Like, what is the breakdown of that? Um, on that note, tell me, like the range of agencies you work with. How big are they? Kind of walk me through that cycle.
Yeah. So for the most part, the agencies that I'm working with, they are probably nearing or have surpassed the $1 million mark in revenue annually. That is, they usually have 8 people on their team or more. And so that is kind of my sweet spot, all the way up until I would say 75 people. Once they hit 50, 75, they've already kind of built the operational infrastructure that they need to get to that point, because it does take a lot. There's always a tipping point of, okay, how do you get from 10 people to 15 people, 15 to 20? And so each kind of inflection point, there are challenges to get there. And once they get to that 50 person mark, I would say they've already carved out their operations. For the most part, they already have people that they've hired internally to take on a lot of those operational roles. And so when they're smaller, they don't have that. And also they don't have the funds for that either, because operations hires, for the most part, are going to be non-billable. And so to add any non-billable expenses to your annual expenses, you take a big hit on profit. And so it does make more sense for people to hire someone like me that's fractional and they don't have to pay a full-time salary.
So I'd like to, from your experience, understand kind of what do you see? Like, what should let's say you're speaking to 3 agency owners. One is at kind of the $1 million mark, maybe just shy of 10 people in their agency. Then you got one that's maybe closer to the kind of $2 to $5 million mark. And then you've got kind of a slightly bigger agency doing maybe $10 million a year, right? What do you notice in terms of operations? Like, can you point on any commonalities of, like, this is typically the problem that the just around the $1 million mark, this is typically their biggest problem. And then, so as you kind of scale up, can you walk me through your experience there?
Yeah. So for the smaller agencies that have less than 10 people, I would say their biggest issue at that point is the owner is in the weeds of everything. And also the team is in the weeds of everything. When you're hiring a team of that size, or growing up until that point, you're hiring people who are really good at what they do, but they're also really scrappy and willing to take on whatever, because when you're an agency that size, really you're throwing things that at people that maybe that's not necessarily their expertise. You have a designer, maybe they're also doing some project management work. You have a project manager, maybe they're also doing some operations work. And so at that point, it gets tricky to start parsing out those roles and really creating expertise amongst each person. There is a lot of growing pains at that point. And so I think that's mainly it at that level is how do we change the kind of org chart and the roles to fit in order to grow to the next level? Because there are some people that are going to be on that team that, at the very start that are not going to be the perfect fit moving forward because maybe they don't have that deeper level of expertise and maybe they don't want to. Maybe they like being a generalist. So that's at the small size. Getting more into, the $5 million mark, maybe they've got, 25 people, say. I would say at that point, it's a lot of maturing their financials. If they haven't already, it's really getting the framework for their financials in place in order for them and them being the owner and leadership to be able to use those numbers to effectively move the needle in the business wherever they want to. Another challenge that I see at that mark is going to be creating leadership. If they've grown to that point, and it's people that are going to be more experienced in their roles, they're going to be have more expertise within that one kind of vertical. It's really hard to build out a leadership team, someone or a team of people that the CEO can trust. I think CEOs and agency founders have a hard time letting go of the reins and really giving the appropriate kind of boundaries for each role. And also, giving them, the information for them to know if they're doing their job well. I think that's a challenge at that point, because when you're at 25, the owner can't be the person to answer all the questions at that point. It's not scalable. And so building out the leadership team can be a challenge for a lot of owners.
Yeah, I fully can relate to that. Even with Funalytics, as we grew and we started taking that on, it's not just agencies, it's every business, right? You get to a stage where, you kind of need to really understand where things stand and then bring in the right leaders to kind of help you, because everything just falls on you otherwise, and it just breaks. It just is not scalable, and it will not take it to the next level. So um, from all of this, from all of your experience, just to close off, I'd love to understand, what is your best kind of growth tactic that you can advise for agencies? Like, look, I'm an agency, I want to grow. Obviously, you're in the operational space, but what is your best growth tactic that you can give somebody?
Yeah. I would say they should get familiar with their financials. And I'm not just talking about obviously I already talked about it at length, but it's not going to be just the numbers that you're getting from your accountant or your bookkeeper, those types of reports where you're looking at, your profit and loss statement every month or your balance sheet every month. It's looking at beyond those numbers, and really understanding what range you're in and what is healthy for your agency. And so I think that can go a long way. It's not going to be the fastest, path to growth, because operations, it's really not that, it's not quick growth, but it is the smartest way to grow, is to just understand those, numbers and go from there. It's getting those numbers every month and actually taking action on them. The most frustrating thing for me is teams that are gathering that information. They present it every month to the CEO and leadership team, and then they just sit on it. Nothing happens. There has to be someone on the team that says, oh, this number is off. Our utilization is really low this month. What happened, and where can we improve on that? That's where I think a lot of agencies drop the ball when they do have those numbers. They're not actually using them.
Very, very interesting. And I think that that's the first time somebody's really approach to growth from an operational standpoint. It's true. We tend to think about growth tactics as what's going to have the exponential big boom type of moment, but what really drives profitable steady growth is fully understanding your financials, fully understanding your KPIs, your metrics, having that scorecard at the end of the day that really drives the company. So, Melanie, I really appreciate this conversation. This was a lot of fun diving into the operational side of agencies and of businesses in general. Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, well, they can learn more about me, on my website. I have that up. It's WeConsult.io, and I do post a lot of content there on my blog where people can dive in and learn more about how they can better operationalize their agencies. And on LinkedIn, just look me up, and I'm pretty active there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.